What on God's green earth is Fintech? And is it even legal here? Well, of course it is. Welcome to the 10th episode of The Pivot. I'm James Deakin, and here today we've got the man who wrote the book. So if he says it's legal, it is legal. Welcome, Attorney Rafael Padilla.
James, thank you for having me. Bernice, hello.
Hi everyone, you're watching The Pivot. This is your legal guide to startups, business, and the online world. I'm James Deakin.
And I'm Attorney Bernice Piñol, and this week I am super thrilled to have our guest with us because he's actually my law professor in San Beda, Alabang. So I'm kind of nervous because he might call me for recitation anytime. And he's actually the only lawyer who has focused his legal practice for blockchain technology and fintech. So we're very honored to have you today. He is the co-founder of the Blockchain Association of the Philippines and the Fintech Philippines Association, and founded BlockDevs Asia. He is also the author of Fintech Law and First Principles, Attorney Rafael Padilla.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Bernice.
Hi.
I'm actually the one who's feeling nervous. I feel like I'm the one who's going to recite today.
It's finally my time
Yeah.
to,
Yeah,
because the whole time in law school, he's the one asking questions. So this time,
that's the usual
vengeance.
Yep.
Welcome,
Your chance
sir. Welcome, sir. We're super happy to have you here, and James is super excited.
I'm
Why is
bursting
that?
at the seams here. I just looked at your book there and I had a bit of a nosebleed. There are no
it's here.
pictures in it.
No.
Can you show? I
Yes.
want to show people.
I'm
They're
such
all
a fan
words.
of this book. That's why, this isn't sponsored or whatever. I'm just a fan.
Well-
So I bought this when I was in Davao. So I had it shipped talaga, attorney. I was telling you about that. And it's like the only law book out there that talks about fintech, cryptocurrency, smart contracts, everything. So this is one of a kind, really.
We must say also that this is part one of a two-part
That's
series,
right.
right? Because we know that we're just going to be able to scratch the surface. So what we're going to do is start today with fintech, because this is a good place for most people to start because everyone's using fintech, whether you know it or
Yeah.
not. So not a lot of people are into cryptocurrency, but they will bleed into cryptocurrency. We'll save that for the next episode. But I guess the gateway drug is fintech.
That's right.
Talk to us a little bit about fintech and its
The book,
origins, or
yeah.
whatever you'd like to share with
Yeah.
people, so we get a nice little base to start on.
Yeah, so fintech simply means financial technology. It's the use of technology in delivering financial services. There are traditional ways of delivering financial service, but since 2008, actually, after the global financial crisis, we have seen new intermediaries perform new kinds of financial intermediation. And this has given rise to even new intermediaries like digital banks, crowd lending platforms, even cryptocurrency exchanges, and non-bank payment service providers. And there are many reasons for this. I think in 2008, we have seen many people disenchanted with the traditional financial system, and they have explored the possibility of an alternative financial system.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, in 2008, right, there's this guy named Satoshi Nakamoto.
Satoshi.
We don't know if he's a group
He's
of
a real
people or an
one.
individual,
Yeah.
but he wrote a white paper about this electronic cash payment system that we now call Bitcoin.
Yeah. So when
eh,
you say fintech, it's really like a general term for, let's say, Gcash, or so for our audience, like what are the examples of fintech?
Okay,
What-
Does it need to conform to something, like it has to be
Like a criteria?
Not
tech-
really.
tech or
Not really. Most of these technologies are counterintuitive, out of the box, unorthodox, non-conventional, and they're mostly emerging technologies. It's common for the financial service, or for the financial service industry, to co-opt technology. We've seen that in the case of Swift as a cross-border
Yes.
payments network, in the case of automated teller machine. But what's really interesting about this new flavor of fintech is how these technologies are now being these technologies feature emerging technologies. Some of them are arguably immature yet, and so we're kind of in the experimental phase. You can probably include blockchain technology there. But you also have technologies like artificial intelligence, mobile payments, that can really support the creation of new delivery channels for these services. And by creating new delivery channels, this also has an impact on financial inclusion, making the financial service available to more people.
That's right. Yeah.
When you say fintech, I mean, like, you're not just talking because it's electronic, right? I mean, like, the Swift code's been there for a while now. You don't consider that fintech, right? Or electronic banking. Would that be classified as fintech, or is that part of the legacy system? Where do you draw the line between fintech
the technology evolves relative to newer technologies now, emerging technologies, then that one is more I would say, can we say that they're, as you've said actually, they're the legacy technologies. But the fintech that is actually on the surge right now and has brought the creation of new financial intermediaries, like again, online lending platforms, peer-to-peer lending platforms, digital banks. These are all created or because of new emerging technologies like again blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and even artificial intelligence. In the case of artificial intelligence, this has now created a new way of performing credit scoring that is different from how banks would typically do their credit investigation. That's usually focuses on documents and audited financial statements and financial documents, right? And past transactions. But you now have new financial intermediaries who use, for example, transactions in a payments channel or platform, or for example, activities in a social media platform to determine the credit score.
Right.
So and with this again, it enhances now the availability of credit to more people.
That's right, yeah.
And
I
really
read in your
demonstrates.
book, Attorney, that's one of the main kind of like benefit of fintech is that it gives access to those remote places that doesn't have that don't have brick and mortar banks, diba? So now they could like access through GCash or whatever. So,
Exactly.
so tell us more about that, of how this opened up to more people, like the access to the financial institutions.
So if we talk about like the traditional financial
The banks,
system, and the poster boy with for that would be a bank, right?
That's right.
Banks are typically concentrated in urban areas. You have small rural banks in some provinces and localities, but that's it, right? Banks, even in like localities in provinces, when you have banks, they typically are intimidating for common people.
For sure, yeah.
And on the other hand, on the part of the bank, it's common for the bank to position itself as stable, secure. That's why you have that intimidating structure, right? But but what this does is actually to restrict access to financial service. You have people who can't access banks. You also have people who get intimidated by banks. But now you have an alternative delivery channel in the form of mobile phones, whether smartphone or even a simple feature phone, where you can actually access financial services.
That's right.
So your phone itself, which is something that is more personal to you, can become a channel for you to enjoy financial service, which is actually important in uplifting the economic status of a person.
That's right.
For sure. And would you consider, like now, because of the problem we're trying to solve, where there's such a large unbanked community, for various reasons which we can't get into right now, but it's created a sort of a wild west in terms of finance, because now people are coming outside of the regulatory boards and providing services. Is this what made you write the book, to add clarity to this space and take it out of the wild west and put some legal framework over it?
That's actually true. There are some misconceptions that need to be clarified in terms of like, are there laws that already apply? Do we regulate technology, or do we regulate the financial activity and the intermediaries? No? So these are some of the things that I've clarified in the book.
How was the whole process of writing this book, Attorney? I'm seriously fascinated by it.
Thank you.
It's a very meaty read.
Yeah, there are no pictures
so,
in it.
Yeah,
drawings,
like I've
right?
practically highlighted everything. This is my boss's book though. So like, what year did you start doing this, and like how was the whole research and writing journey for this book?
Yeah, the book was actually a product of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I
You
had
were
a
at home.
Yeah, I had a
Okay.
book deal. I think I remember January 2020. I had a deadline deadline of say March 2020.
Cool.
And I've done like 15 pages.
Whoa!
Right, and
Because of your schedule.
so at least the pandemic gave me a reasonable excuse that I need more time.
Yes.
And of course, the pandemic, especially at the onset of the pandemic, I do most of my work from home. So I was able to spend the time I need to focus in writing the book. In terms of like the germ or the framework for that book, it came from my presentations from various technology
notes
business conferences, continuing legal educations. So, and even meetups, because in meetups, which is actually we don't do today anymore because of the COVID-19 restrictions, but who knows, maybe early 2021, 2022.
Yes.
But yeah, those provide...
So all of your compiled notes.
Yeah, I just compiled them. And then just added some neat and updates and research more on some topics
so well
that need to be
researched.
clarified.
You have to hire a team for this.
I think the public should know, though, those who are watching, because it gave me a lot of context when I heard this, that attorney over here was exposed to like the crypto space in 2012. So you've got almost a decade of experience, which in crypto is like 100 years,
I didn't
right?
realize that actually.
Yeah, I mean, so you come in, and I thought it's fascinating to point out that you initially, if we're allowed to say, was you were representing a client in Cyprus.
Yeah.
And this is basically because the banking system was starting to collapse over there, and they were looking for a hedge against that, and this was got you into it.
Yeah,
so with 10 years of experience, you have a lot that you can place in that book of real world cases that you actually help to solve. And how it can now be put into the Philippines. Because one thing, I know that when you talk about regulation and framework, from the investor side or from like the casual, it's like, oh no, not another bunch of government rules and stuff, but we need clarity. Clarity grows the space because it provides confidence. People need a direction of where are we allowed to go with this. And then it does help, would you agree? So we do need some regulations?
Yes, insofar as like traditional or conventional financial services, that needs to be regulated as long as some the substance of these activities still conform with, like, for example, if this is remittance, this is payments, these are these are already covered by existing rules, and the fact that you're using new technologies as a platform doesn't really change its applicability. Nevertheless, there are some even financial services themselves are evolving, and the nature of financial intermediation are dynamically changing, especially in the context of decentralized finance or DeFi. Some of these activities we don't even have names, but this financial intermediation, but where there's actually no central authority that administers the transaction, you only deal with code in the form of smart contract. That's something that is unique, that has not been conceived even by existing laws and regulations. So how do you regulate that? I guess for policymakers, the ideal thing to do right now is just to observe and see how this some aspects of this can be regulated.
No need to panic or anything. Just observe for the meantime and maybe
and perhaps don't over-regulate. Especially because I think it's a good policy that we don't regulate the technologies themselves. Because if we do that, there is really a tendency to stymie innovation.
That's right.
And of course, if we do that, we also restrict economic opportunities.
Yeah. So earlier, attorney, I introduced you as like the only crypto lawyer, if that's okay with you, that term. So how did you kind of like pivot your career? Because I'm very curious as a lawyer. I knew you as my professor to be a commercial
When
law
was that?
lawyer.
When was it? Was it 2014?
2014. I did well, right?
Of course you stood
my
out.
mom's watching. Yeah.
Of course you stood out.
Oh, thank you. Anyway,
When
so
it started,
2014, you were a commercial law lawyer, transportation law,
so in
maritime. So how did your career go to this crypto?
Since I practiced law, I
nothing to do with sinking, Crypto, get it? It's a crypto joke.
Crypto.
Okay. So my line of work have always been commercial.
Right.
But I do remember celebrating my 5th anniversary in legal practice.
Okay, what year was
April
that?
2015.
2015.
I thought of what I need to do moving forward in my
Malapit
legal
na.
career. And that's when it occurred to me that there's this one thing that I'm really
You're passionate
and
Ooh,
interested
very
about.
nice.
And I thought, yeah, I can pivot, pun intended, my career by specializing in this area. Of course, it is underserved market by then at that time, but even the market is very small.
But you saw it. You saw the
Yeah.
space. You saw it growing.
I saw. No, I had that vision that eventually this will become mainstream.
And
in the
this is
same
way
manner that
before
internet-
pandemic, obviously.
2015,
Yeah,
I was in his
2015.
class 2014.
So then when the pandemic hit, I mean, all your what you had
Clients.
foreseen, like Gcash blew up into a #1 trillion company.
Yeah, and in the case of Gcash, I think we're starting to notice also the market adoption for digital wallets, but it suddenly accelerated in the pandemic.
Yeah.
Of course, obviously due to the
Exponentially, no?
exponentially. Obviously because of the quarantine restrictions that limit our ability
That's
to
right.
engage in
And the
face-to-face
convenience
transactions.
of it, you know,
Yeah.
it's just paramount.
Yeah, the convenience is very obvious in hindsight, but many people resisted the technology
true.
until they were forced
To use it, yes.
Yeah.
because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
That's what they were saying. The adoption rate for Gcash was,
Crazy.
I can't remember the figure,
I
it was
use Gcash all the
astronomical.
time.
Exponential might even be an understatement.
Yeah.
but-
Absolutely. Who regulates Gcash, for example?
So-
is that BSP?
Yes, so BSP regulates platforms like Gcash and Paymaya as electronic money issuer. And you see, we even have a framework for electronic money issuance as early as 2009. And yeah, so the BSP has saw this new kind of financial intermediary and has developed the necessary rules for this as early as 2009. But yeah, we saw the adoption to really peak in the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. So yeah, e-wallets and electronic money issuers are regulated under Circular 649. Some of the requirements is one is, I guess, a hefty capital requirement of 100 billion, and which I think makes a lot of
In hindsight, Gcash is probably doing that every
Yeah.
minute now.
which
Not a
makes a lot makes a lot of sense because they're supposed to maintain 100% liquidity. They're required to maintain 100% full reserve of the cash that's stored in the wallet, which is, by the way, a different scenario when it comes to commercial banks.
I was gonna say because you have
or
fractal banking.
fractional, and like the fractional reserve
Yes.
requirement right now is what, like 10%, 11%.
So
12%.
Gcash requires 100% no fractional reserve.
They can.
Well, why the difference between the two? Because that's been a problem, right? With you got 10%, and for those who are a little bit unsure of what we're talking about, when you talk about fractional reserve, if I put =1 million pesos into the bank, legally they should keep 100,000 of
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
the problem happens if more than 10% of the people at one time want to withdraw their money,
You have
there's
a
a
bank
collapse.
run. Yeah, it can
So
collapse.
why did they get a free pass versus the fintechs that have to have 100%?
Well, because electronic money issuers are technically not banks. They're not allowed to engage in banking activities. What happens there is your funds are just being stored in a wallet.
That's right. Yeah.
So perhaps the metaphor there is it's literally like a digital version of your wallet. That whatever you have in that wallet, no, should be represented by actual cash stored somewhere.
That's right.
And they're not bank accounts. The term that is being used by the BSP to describe these wallet accounts are transaction accounts. Through this transactions account, you can engage in payment activities, some of them peer-to-peer, some of them to process payments, also to pay perhaps your bills.
Yeah. Attorney, in your book, you also talked about the cybersecurity in the digital banking transactions. So what do you think about the recent BDO hacking, and what do you think we should learn from this as to the cybersecurity?
Well, the BSP is already telling them that they should prioritize cybersecurity. We've heard that, they've admitted to this, that they have a legacy system or technology that is about to phase out early 2022, but this occurred just before that happened. But of course,
We don't have
they
the
should
full facts naman.
but of course they should have done
More.
that way earlier. You have BDO is like the number one bank here in the Philippines, obviously. But look at the smaller banks, commercial banks, who have really invested so
That's
much
right.
money
Union.
in term technology.
Union's a good example of that.
In addition to new digital banks that have been recently licensed by the BSP to operate as such. And the BSP also created this new classification for our class of banks, so-called digital banks, just early this year.
Yeah. So there's also a terminology you mentioned in your book, like cyber insurance, or like an insurance against hacking. So can you tell us more about that, and how can the Philippine banking system take advantage of that?
Well, I think that's one important way to mitigate the risk,
for instances
or to
like
shift
this,
the risk.
right? Like,
But the problem, I think, when it comes to that is even them are having difficulties obtaining policy for this.
Why is that?
I can only. It's because of the multifaceted risks, and some of these risks even traditional
I see.
insurance companies are
Couldn't
even
cover
grappling
or
with.
foresee.
If I can just give one example, when it comes to cryptocurrency as assets and insuring that. Now, in theory, you could probably do that, but there's very few insurance companies who do that. And in terms of like premium, we can really expect them to be
Very
very
high.
expensive. It has
Okay.
something to do. So you see, the work of insurance companies is basically to identify the risk, right? Do some actuarial analysis of such risk, make some computations. But the problem is, yes, we're aware of the risks that we have identified, those that have occurred, but some of these risks are still new. And
they keep changing.
They keep
every
changing.
time,
They're very dynamic.
So
And
the
you can
insurance
understand that
companies
if you're the
couldn't keep
insurance company, it's very difficult to price this.
Yeah.
On another note, I'd like to just expand on that, the BDO hack at the moment. It's because crypto and fintechs, but mostly crypto, is framed as being dangerous, being wild, wild west. Oh, it's unregulated. Oh, you might lose your money and you're not insured and all this. But the reality of it is, how easy is it to get your money back if you've been caught? I mean, the Banco Filipino thing I just heard today has not been solved since, when was that? The 80s?
Late 90s. I
Orient
guess.
Bank was when?
Early 2000.
Has that been solved yet?
Yeah. Not really
What about
sure.
those other funds, those college funds? Was it? I mean,
College
so
insurance.
in reality, you're technically covered, you're technically insured, but then if you get your money 20 years later, what's the purchasing power of that insured amount?
That
And
has
by
been
the way,
marked.
that was only 100,000
Yep.
back then. It's
Yeah.
only been raised to 500 recently.
Yep. Under the
So is it
today's,
really? Is it worth the paper it's printed on, so to speak?
Well, I guess the lesson there is, once you give your money, whether that's to a traditional financial intermediary or even unregulated, there's always a risk. Regulation might be there to somehow mitigate that risk, but you can't absolutely eliminate that risk.
How much
So-
is theater?
Theater.
Yeah, like
It's a
it's security theater.
Yeah.
It's like this sense that we have this
Oh, yeah,
protection,
yeah.
but in reality,
Yeah, so
it's
so
just
more of
all
a security
smoke and mirrors
blanket.
and bells
Yeah.
and whistles and
Yep.
and theater.
Yeah, that's true. It somehow gives the banking public some confidence, and maybe the financial system can latch to that. But maybe sometimes it might be a false sense of security. I guess the best way to deal with this is, yes, regulation might be there to somehow provide some layer of protection, but let's not also forget that we as users or as individuals should also take some precautions
Or
or
accountability.
measures.
But this is the whole, I guess, the push of crypto is that, you've got personal serenity over your money. That's one of the big sells, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the only things you can really have self-custody of.
Yep.
Because if you have cash, you can have self-custody of it. But one, it's a
Yeah.
depreciating. It's
Asset.
depreciating, yeah. and you have storage issues. I mean, that's a serious security problem. So people who flock towards crypto now, and we'll talk more about this in episode 2, but we'll just touch on it, are looking for a hedge against the legacy system. They want to rise with inflation because at the moment, the interest rates that they get from their banks versus the inflation rates, we're losing. So people are looking for a hedge. Crypto, especially when you look at Bitcoin and stuff, has traditionally not just kept up with inflation, but has outperformed it. But it comes with a self-accountability. And that's the risk that people have to take, is that when you have your Bitcoin, you are responsible. You put it into your cold storage or you keep it in exchange. But if you keep it in exchange, it's not really your coin, as they say.
It's a trade-off. There are really some concerns when you part with your money and give it to a financial institution or even to a custody the cryptocurrency wallet.
Risk. It's always a risk.
You'll create that risk. But at the same time, if you decide to be your own bank, right? You have to be ready also and prepare for your own bank heist. Right?
Absolutely.
Right. So,
the question I wanted to lead to, sorry, attorney,
we're gonna wrap up, okay?
Yeah, I was trying to frame into this question. It's like, if that's the case, right, and people start to say, okay, well, I'm gonna start to manage my own risk. It turns out, but it's not as hard as I was told it was. Yes, there's some risk, but there's more reward, etc. Who's regulating the banks? Is there a conflict of interest? Because if the system that's coming to disrupt them, wouldn't they have every incentive to block that, or are they independent? The regulators, basically, do they have a conflict of interest to make it easier to buy crypto, make it easier to have these disruptive services come in?
Perhaps not necessarily, because Governor Ben Diokno himself, in one of his statements, I think just last year or 2019, said that technologies like blockchain and digital currencies can actually enhance financial inclusion. Right? So they see this technology as something that could complement some of their statutory and constitutional mandates. To enhance the availability of financial services. But of course, as policymakers, they're also concerned with some risks. And this is again where perhaps regulation comes to the rescue.
I think we should make this a 3-part.
No, we should. Because we haven't even touched on Leica gems here.
I know, there's just so much to talk about. But no, just to wrap up this part 1, I'm so excited for part 2 and 3.
And 4.
No, but like, how has it been with you working with because you're a founder, right, attorney? How has it been working with startups and blockchain startups? And tell us more about the organization that you started.
So working with startups are quite enjoyable. I really delight it. You see founders who have this vision and like really dreaming, and you can see that they have that opportunity to really make it. I gravitate towards that, and I am also inspired to work hard when I see founders who, if I'm being honest, I feel that from a business perspective, are even smarter than me. They know things that even I myself don't know. I mean, that's why I guess I'm in law, because I don't have that much business acumen, unlike this individuals.
But you learn so much from
and
them.
You'll notice these are young individuals. That's
20s.
What's so fascinating about that. They're even smarter than maybe some of their senior counterparts. So working with some of the organizations, industry organizations I've been with, it to be honest, it's really fun at the beginning, but at some point in the future, some vested interest, corporate propaganda starts to infiltrate, and the politics, and to be honest, I'm not really I don't really enjoy that, and that must be that's also one of the reasons why I have phased out and left some of the industry organizations that I used to be part with. I'm now focused in this Association of Professional Developers, Blockchain Devs, Black Devs Asia Inc. I just really enjoyed.
You co-founded it.
I co-founded that, and just really enjoying the company of this really intelligent
it's a different world.
developers.
It's a different world from our legal world. The ecosystem is so vibrant, and I love working with them actually.
Yep.
And like what we say in the show, like the legal aspect or the law should help and empower
Yep.
these startups, right?
Yes.
Not stifle them. And
Yes.
you know, like all these regulations could be such pain points. Kasi.
Yeah.
So lawyers should be there to take away those pain
Yeah,
points.
we offer guidance.
Yes.
There are some things that they feel like they can do.
That's right.
They can't do.
Yes.
But actually,
Pwede gawa ng
we
paraan.
clarify
That's right.
that this is how they can do it.
Exactly.
Right? And there are things also that they think they can do. But this is again where we
That's
help and tell them that you need to pause for a moment and
Yes,
consider
yes.
the legal and regulatory aspects of
Because
this.
they sometimes go ahead, you know.
Yeah,
You just
yeah.
come
Yeah.
chasing.
They can do what they want to do. They can accomplish their vision. We're just here to advise them
Great,
and
great,
guide them
great.
along
Yeah,
the way.
Yeah.
Well, so much to get through, but you know what? We've run out of time for this episode, but we did promise you that this is going to be one of a 2 or maybe a 3 or
Three.
maybe a 4-part series. We don't know yet.
We
but
have the whole day.
we're not going to let attorney Rafael out of his chair because we are coming back with another episode, which we're going to talk a little bit more about cryptocurrency.
That's
We're going to
right,
do a
yeah.
deeper dive into stuff like Bitcoin and all of that. So stick with us. But of course, today's episode would not have been possible just with the 3 of us over here, right, attorney?
Yeah, so we'd like to thank our sponsors, Mama Lou's Italian Kitchen, and of course, Home Lab for keeping us safe. And of course, we'd like to thank Attorney Attorney Rafael Padilla for being here. And we're super excited for the next part of this, so you all should watch out for that. So thank you very much to Aklan Group of Companies, of course. And this show is brought to you by the law firm of Piñol, Santos and Associates.
We'd also like to thank Home Lab, who make sure that we're all safe and
That's
sound
right.
over here
Swabbed.
and get ourselves swabbed before we meet each other. Don't forget, you can also get the Home Lab app in your Google Play Store or iOS App Store and book your home care anywhere.
See you again next week.
Yeah,
and
pop in your questions. We'd
That's
love
right.
to hear. Maybe you can
Subscribe,
sneak in one,
subscribe.
right?
Yeah.
Sneak in a question before the next episode. We'll try and answer it for you. But we'll be talking about cryptocurrencies,
Exactly.
and that will be the
Just
focus.
Yeah.
So till
type in
then,
all of your questions.
I'm James Deakin.
And I'm Attorney Bernice Piñol, and this is Attorney Rafael Padilla. Thank you again, sir. And see you in 7 days. Bye-bye.